Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to this afternoon's panel discussion with our guest. So my name is Sherry Collins. I'm the founder of the Pitch Fanzine. It's a media brand, which I've recently discovered, and I've been doing magazine for quite a while, but I finally decided what my brand is, and it is a media brand in lots of different guises. But I'm here with three guests who's going to be talking to you about their careers, as well as the topic that we're discussing today, how emerging creatives nurture their own creative ambitions in line with their own values. Our guests today are June, Jayanta and Rakesh, who I'm going to actually ask them if they can actually just give us a brief intro about themselves. That's all right. So starting with June, can you tell us a little bit more about you and what you do?
Sure. My name is June Mineyama-Smithson. I am an artist and a graphic designer, goes by the name Mummy Moo. And I have been a graphic designer in branding, but recently I pivoted as an artist, and I am doing lots of varied work from TV, ident, and exhibition installation in Coventry that's coming this weekend, and as well as selling print and tote bags. That's me.
Yeah, brilliant. That's excellent. Thank you. Jayanta, can you tell us a bit more about you and your work?
My name is Jayanta Jenkins, and I'm Executive Vice President, Head of Content Marketing for Disney Branded Television, National Geographic at Disney General Entertainment. And my journey toward this role has been through working in agencies and brands. So spent time at Wieden Kennedy, Chiat in the United States, and then Apple, working Beats by Dre, and after that Twitter. And yeah, here I am. Good morning, good afternoon.
Brilliant. And you're coming all the way from New York?
No, San Francisco.
Is it New York? San Francisco. No. How do I imagine you in New York? Okay, it's lovely having you. And San Francisco, I'm imagining that, yeah, there's hills, bridges. Rakesh, can you tell us a little bit more about you and what you do, please? Thank you.
Hey, I'm Rakesh. So I'm a digital designer and art director with over a decade of experience in digital advertising. So that encompasses web, app, social, and games. I've worked for quite a few agencies, including Digitas, Iris, had a short stint at Facebook, and also We Are Social. I'm currently freelance, but I'm focusing my attention on an independent mentoring scheme that I've been running since the beginning of the year.
Oh, brilliant. Oh, amazing. Okay. All right, so that's our panel, and I've got some questions. I'm just going to kick off, if that's all right, and then we've got some questions at the end as well from you guys who are already started sending some stuff for a panel. So, June, I'm going to start with you, if that's all right.
Yep.
First question is, so you're fresh out of university. Being fresh out of university is daunting for everyone, especially in such a competitive industry and peer pool. What was your experience of this first step out into the working world? So after you left uni, how did you feel? How did you make it work?
So I graduated twice actually in Japan and here in the UK. But when I graduated in Japan first time with degree in English language, the time was called Ice Age of job hunter for job hunters, and it was really, really hard to get a job, but I managed to get a job in desk work in a airline company, Japan Airlines, but I wasn't destined to do that, obviously, and I got bored quickly. I went to night school to retrain as a web designer, became web designer, got bored a bit, and came to London to study graphic design. And when I graduated from London College of Communication, it was actually the first year the New Blood exhibition, so New Blood exhibition ever happened. And in our degree show, my wall was suddenly empty because D&AD took my work. And I remember feeling really angry. Took my work. D&AD obviously took my work for the bigger exhibition. So that was a good thing. And from that, actually, some people left business cards in the D&AD New Blood exhibition. But I ended up in a small agency I really wanted to work with, who I got in touch upon graduation.
Oh, brilliant. So, so hard route then.
Yes, yeah, definitely.
Okay. And Jayanta, how was it for you? How did you kind of like, I know the story because you've been in Pitch Magazine a bit. I think I know a bit of the story. But I'd love to hear, and you've been on my cover. Sorry, not a bit. You've been on my cover of my magazine when I first started out. So I want to hear what happened? How did you, after you left uni, how, number one, I think you were inspired when you were at uni, but tell me the story of how you kind of like got into this industry.
Yes, it was by accident. I was taking a course in university, and I actually had wanted to become a photojournalist, and I took a marketing class, and the instructor was a creative director at the time at an agency with the university in Richmond, Virginia. And the gentleman was a creative director at the Martin Agency in Richmond, Virginia. But I remember coming into the class, a bunch of students had their ads they had made for a previous semester. It was my first semester taking the course. And I just brought my photographs. And the gentleman, his name was Jerry Torsha, he looked through my photographs and said, I should be an art director. And I said, what's that? And he handed me a D&AD. He handed me a One Club, and he handed me the New York Advertising Manual. And I remember flipping through those books and recognizing one name for the work that I actually really started liking quite a bit. It was this agency I'd never heard of that worked on a brand called Nike and a few others. It was Wieden Kennedy. And I determined when I looked at the work that whoever the people were that were making those adverts would probably be people I would get along with because the work just seemed very nuanced and fun and spirited. And from that moment forward, I never really looked back and determined that I wanted to be in advertising. I ended up getting my undergraduate degree and then going back to get postgraduate degree in advertising, art direction. And I've been very fortunate since then to have worked at Wieden Kennedy and for a number of years, and to have gone forward into other agencies that worked on sports brands and so on and so forth. So I pretty much had a vision of what I wanted to do and aligned myself to that, and have been kind of expanding ever since then. So.
That's very lucky. So you had a plan.
Absolutely.
Brilliant. Okay, so for those who have a plan, it's okay, right? And then Rakesh, hi Rakesh. Can you tell us a little bit more about uni? You finished uni. How did you get into the creative industry?
Yeah, so I graduated from graphic information design course at the University of Westminster. Wasn't sure what I was going to do once I left. It was quite a mixed media course. I ended up taking a specialism in digital and interaction. One of the things we did when we left that course was exhibit at D&AD New Blood, and that was my actual kind of entry point. I remember exhibiting with a handful of my other classmates and collected a few business cards, did a good sales pitch for myself every time someone came anywhere near our tables. And then I didn't hear back from anyone that gave me a card, although they took my details for a couple of months. Meanwhile, I was interning for free at a small, you could intern for free back then. And I was interning at a small design studio called Hey Moscow. The owner there was really nice, put us on some nice kind of entry-level briefs to get going after graduating. And shortly after, I got a call from a guy called Maurice Clark, who was the creative services manager at Digitas. And yeah, he asked me to come in and represent some of my work. There's a sub-story in that as well. It was actually my friend Ahmed that collected the first business card. As Maurice was leaving our area, he kind of tapped him in the shoulder, said, come back and check out this guy's work too. It's pretty good.
Oh.
I remember him saying it. And if you hadn't intervened, I probably wouldn't have got my first job later on down the line. Twist in the story was we both interned at Digitas. We both got in. Internship lasted a month. That was paid. I was over the moon. Internship was only a month. Then I remember one of the creative directors at the time, Adam Buxton, said, look, it's not over, just come in, hide under the table if you have to, and maybe we'll give you work. So I just kind of showed up every Monday pretending I was in the area, and there was always stuff to do. And you invoice it at the end of the week. And I was racking up a good 4 days a week for about 8 months until the budgets came back to hire a junior. And I kind of, I met everyone on the job and kind of built up my reputation there. And yeah, and agreed my first junior contracts about a year after, well, just under a year after graduating. And I was in. It was a funny journey. It actually started as a junior art director. Within the first month, I already spoke to the ECD, and I was like, hold on, at university, I could design and art direct. Why is everything so separate once we've walked into the industry? And it was quite frustrating at the time because you're used to coming up with ideas and executing, but apparently the way the industry was structured, which I've come to accept kind of, is that you kind of did one or the other. But he made a pact with me. He said I could remain conceptual as long as I focused on design, if that's what I really wanted to do, and I did. But what I ended up doing was being a hybrid and sitting on the fence, and it kind of established how I wanted to work moving forwards. It's a bit difficult depending on what agency you work for, because sometimes it is boxed off for process reasons and it works. But for me, my comfort came from contributing to one side and the other. It gets difficult when you keep moving between agencies because you might have to re-establish that persona, especially if it is rigid. But I guess if you can show your worth, you'll always have that flexibility, I've found. One thing I've always said to the people that I'm mentoring or grads that I do speak to is if you do like both sides, make it clear and go for the opportunities where it's available to show your worth. And I think everything will unfold in the right way. It's better than keeping it all secret to yourself or keeping your feelings locked up. And then 10 years down the line, regretting that chance you never had to do a bit more of the other thing. So I guess a learning from that experience would be definitely speak up if you want to try something else. And if you're surrounded by good management, they can make that happen with ease.
Oh, brilliant. I love the idea that you mentioned about reputation build while you're actually doing your internship, so that people can actually get to know you, even, while you're doing it, before you even got, before you're actually in the company. I love that. That was really good. You look back on that and thinking that was, a lot of people don't realize that they need to actually build a reputation at the same time. So the next question, thank you very much for sharing that. I think that was it was interesting to see the different depths of ways of getting to the industry. So what were the biggest pressures then that gave you a sense of urgency in your journey? So, I mean, June, you're open. You asked me a question earlier. I'm gonna go to you next. I'm not, if that's all right. Just so that I can actually understand. Was there a pressure on you to do well? Obviously in Japan and in London. Was there pressure on you from any, at all? How did you experience it? Did you just feel like you could actually just try anything?
Yeah, I don't think there was anything big to respond, but I think gradually I got more senior in my career as well as family life. I had my son, and I wanted more flexibility. So yeah, I think with my career needs as well as family needs, it kind of gradually happened, and I gradually adjusted my working life bit by bit, but it didn't happen in a dramatical way.
Okay, cool. Jayanta, what about you?
Can you repeat the question, please?
Oh yeah, so the question is, so did you have, was there any pressure? I know that as your career journey has been happening, has there been pressure coming from different sides that you've had to, kind of think on, or I know that you've got a child now, haven't you? Has that changed the way that you work and all of that, or you just kind of like, your flows? Was there any urgency to your journey, basically?
Well, some things that haven't changed or have changed it quite a bit actually since I started. I don't know that it's ever been particularly easy for women or people of color in this business, so the pressure that one puts on oneself as a as a person outside of the general population, however you want to articulate it, is quite different, because most of the agencies where I wanted to be, there weren't many people that looked like me at the time, so there's navigating that dynamic, which I really feel I embraced and took on, and really didn't create a mindset of playing the victim or playing any sort of, like Rakesh, a persona that would make me feel as though I wasn't able to contribute. And so there was a great deal of awareness. I wouldn't call it pressure, awareness. And but I was able to really navigate and contribute and be nurtured and supported, and and then able to thrive and do things in this business that I'd always wanted to do. And I think for other minorities, women, people who are starting in this business, when you look out at these companies, you don't see people that look like you. That doesn't mean that you're not capable or won't be included or can't be included. So I think all of us in some ways put lots of urgency and pressure on ourselves, because you want to show up and be able to be given the same opportunities as everyone else in this business. I am a new father, and I'm fortunate that I get to work for a company where the things I put into the world will hopefully help my son place himself in a way that makes him feel included, like I've chosen to in this industry. But when you get through those hurdles, and then you talk about the job at hand, the pressures I put on myself are just to, inspire, work purposefully. I have a nonprofit that I started that is very much on the outset of the things that I've, been doing in this industry. So I get to give back. And so, you use the word urgency, but I would just say that overall, anything that felt like an obstacle or a hindrance, I've turned into a great deal of fuel that has propelled me through this experience.
I would totally agree. I just that just resonated with me, because it's the feel bit. It's like, but it's, I think, like, we constantly need to take, you take those bits that might have put pressure on you and actually just use them as your fuel to go forward. I totally, that is brilliant. Thank you. And Rakesh, do you have anything to add, or I'm happy to kind of move on to the next question?
Yeah. Similarly to the last points, I think there was a lot of pressure walking into an industry. It took me about a year to figure out what my surroundings actually looked like, because I was kind of starstruck of walking into an industry and working on these kind of brand briefs. And I think when you lift your head up after about a year and you look around and you're like, where are all the other people that kind of look like me, or people that went to the type of schools that I went to? And it kind of hits you quite hard. And I remember when it sunk in, I was quite taken back by it. But I think, like, the best way to combat that is it does, when you realize the state of the industry from an ethnic perspective, it does fire you up to work harder and push. and try and reach those levels that you might think in your own head that you're not capable or entitled to achieving. And it really puts a rocket up your butt to get there quicker and work harder. But one thing I've always done, again, giving back, is I remember I was only a junior and I tapped up. I was friends with the year below me at uni. I realized one of the best students was looking for a job and I hooked her up with an interview. She got in. And even that in itself has its own kind of kick to it. And literally every agency I've ever worked for, I just recommending as many people as I can, at least to have an interview. But best case scenario, you get a job and you're kind of doing good work there and trying to do your own little contribution to diversify the workspace. I mean, you can argue it's getting a little bit better, but I think from personal standards, I don't think it's anywhere as good as it should be. And there's a lot of pressure on those big agencies to do more than sign up to, I don't know, there's a lot of performative actions going on out there, and they're not really adding up to everything. And yeah, I think there's a long way to go, but I think the professionals that are coming from different backgrounds are speaking up on it and trying to push it themselves rather than just, I remember just complaining and doing nothing. And the moment you switch that into action and you start contributing, there's a lot of positive change that can come out of it, and you can see the results of it already. Things can take a bit longer than it needs to take, but you can see the cogs moving already, so you can only really be hopeful of what the future holds.
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much for that. That's I love the idea of you know, tapping back your uni and like recommending talent, because actually, you know, that is a really good way of kind of doing it. And if everyone kind of did that, you know, it would kind of like there will be there. It's like that +1 really was for the other person in your community that you should invite to the event. So next question, Jayanta, you mentioned about sometimes, you know, using those setbacks as like rocket fuel for, you know, to move forward. And this question I'm going to ask you is, can you share an example of a setback you have faced along the way and what you learned from this?
Yeah, you know, a setback that I faced is very interesting, because I spent a great deal of time, like, you know, really, I like wanting to work for places like Wieden and Kennedy and Chiat, and what was very interesting for me getting into Wieden that I didn't prepare for, that ended up being a really big setback, was setting these goals, achieving them, but not having had a goal after the goal. And I'm coming at this question in a very different way, but I achieved everything I wanted to achieve at Wieden and Kennedy in under 10 years, but didn't think about the plan after that plan. So I ended up going into free fall a little bit after my 7 years at Wieden and Kennedy, because I didn't have a goal after that. And, you know, it did become a bit of a setback. And I spent about a good year kind of in free fall, and then ended up sort of landing on my feet again and thinking about my worldview in terms of this industry in a much different way, you know. And I think, you know, another one of the real sort of ambient setbacks that, you know, one can face in this industry is excess. You know, we are in an industry where the excesses are real, you know, in terms of working too hard, playing too hard. And I found that the thing that has created a bigger white space for me is approaching this industry with a high degree of, you know, thoughtfulness and purpose. And that has created stability for me, you know. And yeah, I just think it's very interesting to set your goals, but to set them in a way that you can continue to be expansive. Don't be pointillistic with your goals, you know. And that's sort of what happened to me early on. That was a setback.
Oh, brilliant. Okay, so have a plan and then have a plan after the plan after you achieve your plan, okay? And that involves like a year out, all right, in the Caribbean or somewhere. Okay. Rakesh, what about you? Thanks, Jayanta. That was lovely. Rakesh, what about you? Have you had any setbacks, and how have you, you know, how have you overcome them? And what have you learned from this, basically? What have you learned from it?
I've had quite a few different setbacks depending on the point in time. I think once you're in the industry and you've got a good feel for it, there are things like being trapped on work that you don't enjoy doing anymore. There are things like having an incompatible manager, or even having salary issues. And these are like the classic things that you experience as you go through. And I think although they seem really intense at the time, when you look back, there were strong lessons of, one, how to conduct yourself, but also how to kind of understand the industry you're in a little bit better. I mean, all of those things are resolvable. There's two things you can really do, and it's having a context of how big the industry is. So I think when you're in an agency, you get lost in that environment. You think this is the be all and end all. This is my home, my family, team, and all of that stuff. But until you kind of apply for another job, I think we need to normalize the fact that people move on and their average tenure is 2 years at every agency. I think tell students that you won't stay at your first job longer than it hurts you. And I did that and multiple times. I always tend to stay a year longer than I need to. But again, I don't regret those choices. Just everything happens the way it needs to happen for you to figure out what to do next. And the kind of divine timing of events also kind of is ironic when you're done with it. But I think understanding that it's normal to move around. It's normal to start to dislike what you're doing. Maybe it's just been too repetitive. Maybe you've outgrown that environment. And the best thing to do is just keep an eye out. I mean, I would say there's a bit of pressure once you land your first job. You're still on probation for those 3 months, and there's a chance you might not even like it. And some people kind of swallow that and go, no, I need this job, I'll stay in. But if I could give my younger self advice, I would say keep talking to recruiters within those first 3 months or whatever, because you don't know how it's going to go. You don't want to lock yourself into something that's going to make you miserable, in a sense that it affects your creativity, because we all know when you're in a good mood, well, actually controversial, but when you're in a good mood, great ideas can come to you quite smoothly. But on the flip side, which can be exploited when you're in a dark space, you can come up with some pretty amazing stuff too. But I guess it's finding those balances within yourself and that self-respect, and honoring what your limits are, but also understanding that there are so many cool agencies out there. Again, I got lucky with a fairly well-known digital agency at the beginning. I was like, where do I go next? They're massive in America, and I'm lucky to work in the London office, and I was. But there are loads of equivalents, and it's a matter of networking and sending someone a cheeky DM on LinkedIn and seeing if they respond, or if just telling them to have a look at your book can go a long way. I know I've kind of manufactured a few conversations just by sharing a link. So it could be as easy as that.
No, I love that networking. The networking bit as well is actually one of the main 50% of it, isn't it? As well as doing the work, is then also be able to tell people about it and do like different kind of things and move on to the next one. Okay, that's brilliant. June, did you have something to add to that? Would you like me to repeat the question?
As Rakesh was saying, which setback story do you want to hear?
Well, the one that keeps popping up every time you go, I don't want to remember that. the one after the other one.
Yeah. I think I'll tell you my setback story that might be most relevant to this audience. So, I was working in a small agency as a full-time graphic designer. But I was there for a while, really happy. The company was growing. I was growing as a designer as well. And I wasn't the designer that they hired, and the company was not the company at the time I was hired. So there was kind of a gap between what I needed and the company needed. And Jayanta can probably tell us, as a big boss, there's business needs to be met. And but I had my creative needs I wanted to push, and I was doing for a while, like trying to press my creativity into client work, which of course did not meet clients' needs at all. And I was like telling my boss, "Well, this is brilliant. This is really great design. Why are you not taking it?" And of course it doesn't, because it doesn't meet clients' needs. So that's when I kind of went freelance, and at the same time started my own self-initiative projects to let my creative steam out properly on my term, rather than try to do that on the job. So yeah, that was good learning. Don't try to force your creativity into the client's project.
Oh, brilliant. Is that when a lot of people kind of like end up doing side hustles? Do you find, did anyone kind of start doing side hustles? So you're doing the main job, which you know that you actually may not be fitting your creativity, but then you do another side hustle just to get that going. Did you start side hustles as well and all of that? Or was a new side hustle, then the freelance, your new company?
Well, I started my my own product line, prints and laptop bags. Yeah, that's what I ended up with through that, really.
Okay, right, brilliant. Okay, thank you. Okay, so next question I have here is, okay, how did you figure out that this is a place you wanted to end up? So I suppose how did you figure out that the creative industry was a place that you wanted to end up at? And was it a long-term vision or a series of small decisions? So how did you end up realizing that you were creative? I'm assuming that question is, or if anyone else interpreted it a completely different way, but that's what I think that question's about. So how did you figure out that the place you wanted to end up? Like, you know, Jayanta, you've ended up where you are now. You figured it out, you know, so obviously someone mentioned it's a classroom, but all the different journeys that you've made, obviously that's on you. So how did you figure it all out?
You know, it's a great question. I'm as excited to hear what June and Rakesh have to say about this as well. I find that everything that I've done and continue to do inform this journey. You know, I think we're very fortunate that what we do in our sort of off life really informs what we get to do in a creative role. You know, and I think I've had so many interests as a young child, from science to storytelling to comic books to music to anthropology to architecture to design to fashion, that all feed into what I get to do, what I've always done, you know. When I was at agencies working on sports brands, it's because I love sports culture. And now, you know, getting the privilege to work at a company like Disney, which is at the seat of storytelling, of all the things I grew up with. And then, you know, we mentioned my son. I happen to work for a company where, you know, at the age of 2, my son already knew who Mickey Mouse was, you know. So I think when you really sort of let go a bit, I find that your career inadvertently can intersect with your life. Like, I couldn't have imagined at the beginning of my career that 20 plus years later, I would still feel that like it's day one, which I really do. And that my role has met me exactly where I am as a new parent. And that all the things that I've learned along the way have been really proxies to this opportunity. And I think Rakesh had mentioned this a bit, you know, like there's a lot of things I don't know about what I'm doing right now. And I was actually invited into this opportunity for what I do know and what I don't know. And so, you know, I'll sort of just close this bit and toss and throw the conversation to whoever wants to pick it up next by saying that, you know, I just really love that all these years later, it still feels fresh and new, and I'm learning still. You know, it's just like that's one of the beauties of this industry for me, and I love it. You know.
I totally agree. Or it doesn't feel like work. You're just kind of just doing it. It's just like, you know, it doesn't feel like what's work? What's that word?
You know what? Honestly, like it has never felt like work. The part of this industry that's felt like work are just navigating the personalities. you know, the Junes who walk in and say, "This is the best thing ever."
Mhm.
And you know what, June, you were right in those moments, you know.
Yeah, totally. So June, yeah. So yeah, do you want to expand on that, June, or do you want to repeat the question? You good? So what was it? Yeah, your long-term vision. You know, yeah, and have you achieved that?
Yeah, I think in my case, I was always interested in creative occupation. My grandfather was a calligrapher, and two of my uncles were a screen print artist and interior designer. Despite that, my first degree was English language, so I was big into Noam Chomsky's linguistics and phonetics, and I thought I did that because that's more kind of serious stuff I need to be doing. and I, like I said, I ended up in a big corporation. But yeah, I think it just didn't feel right. So I didn't have the plan to go into creative industry first, but just kind of 2 years in the corporate world, I just realized that this is not what I want to be doing. And yeah, like I said, I retrained myself and yeah, become creative. Sorry, a graphic designer and artist. And but what I want to tell everyone who's watching this is you can always retrain yourself and recourse. And my favorite story is Franz Ferdinand, the band Franz Ferdinand's bassist, was in the band because he liked the social aspect of being in the band, and he wasn't really serious about music. But when the band got successful, he realized that he needs to be a bit more serious. He actually downloaded a PDF about how to be a better bassist and retrained himself and got better musician. So yeah, if your degree and your occupation didn't align, there's always opportunity to pursue what you want. So yeah, nothing is set in stone.
Okay, cool. And Rakesh, thank you for that, June. Rakesh, do you have anything else to add to that? After, you know, before uni was, you know, did you always knew that you were going to create?
Yeah, I was always an artistic kid. I think my mum kind of instilled that in me because we used to like do still life drawing together, and she teach me how to use watercolors and stuff. And it got to a point where I actually remember asking, it's like, do you think they'll pay me to draw, Mum? And all of a sudden that turns into graphic design, and you get a bit techie with it and you're involved in interaction. But I'm pretty sure if digital wasn't a thing, I'd probably be a toy maker, and that's kind of how I'm wired. It's just I'm kind of attached to being a big kid. Like I never wanted an adult job, and I still don't. And I think it's a luxury to be able to have an industry that allows you to kind of channel your inner kid and be as creative as you were when you were a toddler, when you're 3, 4, 5 years old, but in a much more sophisticated, evolved, developed way, because we've picked up loads of information as we've gone along. There is a catch though, because I think there's a cut-off point, because see, I've gone from intern, junior, mid, senior, associate director to design director, and there's a point where you stop. I felt like I stopped being a kid, and I think it's good to know, and it's healthy to know that. I think the higher up you go, as glamorous as it sounds, for me it became less creative, because there are other business aspects which are cool and good to know about if you were to ever have your own venture in the future, for example, or work at operational level again. But I think my passion comes from creating or planting the seeds of creativity within design teams and creative teams on projects. But again, I think I had to climb the ladder and fall off the top to reassess the ladder and go, I think I quite liked it over there. So similar to retraining, you can kind of assess your own growth and decide where you are your most content, and then maybe invest in that for a longer term once you figure that out. The whole thing is like it's a process of self-evolution, really, and the more you learn about yourself as you go along, you know how to get the best out of yourself, and most importantly, keep yourself happy. But yeah, that's my take on it.
No, that's great. I love the idea that you're after your 7 years, you're then what, toy making, do you think? You're gonna make it to you want do you want to that is that the retirement plan? Is that
no, I've always applied gamification into nearly every project that I work on, and how to make it more playful and immersive for audiences. I think that's why I was drawn to the digital pathway way back at uni. It's like I kind of knew what I wanted to do, ended up going round about the houses, and ended up doing what I intended to do in the first place. But you just need to explore everything to, I guess, make sure, because if you don't give it a go, you'll never know for sure if it is what you want to do. Because sometimes you have a vision and a dream and you do it, and it doesn't live up to your own expectations. So you've got to keep on the lookout for the next best thing, and that's close to your skill set, but also entertains you as you go along.
okay? All right. Well, that sounds great. So I'm coming up to the last questions that I've here, but I've got other questions as well as coming in, which I'll give to you. But it's just, you know, as a graduate, I remember when I graduated, one of the things was like, okay, now everyone's getting a job. I need to get a job too, right? As opposed to take your time, and you might find a path that finds you. So what can graduates do to take the pressure off a little in kind of like trying to, you know, for their mates or whatever, you know, because so and so's got a job, so I've got to get one. You know, how do you? Is there anyone, you know, how did you? Yeah, what can graduates do? Basically, what's your advice for graduates to kind of make sure that they don't kind of start losing hope? And anyone want to jump in and say that, or
yeah, I'm happy to jump in.
Brilliant. Thanks, Jayanta.
No, absolutely. So I pretty much had started to understand where I wanted to be very early on, you know, and I had a list of 10 agencies that I had always wanted to work for. And I, you know, did it in order from 1 to 10, and it was Wyden, it was the Martin Agency, it was Chiat Day, it was Fallon McElligott. At the time, it was Fallon McElligott. It was BBH, and, you know, I forget what the others were. And I had sent out, you know, my portfolio, because that's what you did in the late 90s. You actually sent books out, and I made cold calls as well. And you know, someone that I had reached out to actually became a mentor. So, you know, what I'm prepping is finding mentors. But I mean, I really ultimately had a plan of where I wanted to be, and ended up at the top three places, you know, Chiat, Wyden, and the Martin Agency. So, you know, and that is, you know, we're talking about putting pressure on yourself, because what if none of those things happened for me, you know? And in reality, it took me 7 years to get the job at Wyden and Kennedy, you know? But I think really you have to somewhat formalize a bit of a path, a plan, so that way you at least are aligning towards something. And the other piece is just, it's okay to fail, you know, and actually, my failures are as much a part of my journey that are meaningful as my successes. And I think we're a highlight culture, so we only talk about the things that, you know, make up the highlight reel. But fundamentally, the failures are going to be the thing that help you learn how to, you know, muster the energy and achieve. But again, I would just say I really had a plan. I really thought through where I wanted to be.
Yes, I do that plan thing too, and everyone thought I was mad. I'm just like, oh, there's another person out there who does that. Amazing. Rakesh, you know, what about you? What you know, what pressure? What advice would you give to graduates to kind of like not be so, you know, feeling the pressure too much?
I think give yourself a bit of slack in understanding that, especially trying to break into the industry now in the current climate, super competitive, and agencies and budgets have been a bit wild for the past year and a half as well. So if you are interviewing and not getting the responses that you're hoping for, just understand there's a whole load of other applicants that the hiring managers are having to look at and consider carefully, on top of the usual kind of interviewing process of making sure the person has the correct skill set to hit the ground running at this particular agency and this particular team, as well as understanding whether, although the term culture fit can be quite dangerous, because you can almost censor people from gaining entry into certain workplaces, but to an extent, it's understanding that you'd be compatible with that particular team of designers or creatives, in the sense that if you ended up there, you might feel uncomfortable in that environment because it doesn't necessarily match your personality traits, which is quite understandable as well. I would say don't burn yourself out on applying, because that's where the pressure really is. You could sit there for like 8 hours a day just sending as many applications as you want, and your morale goes down, your exhaustion level goes up. And especially if you're applying to a large number of places and you're not hearing much, it can be quite damaging. So I think it's good to take breaks between applying. You'll get called into the right interview for the right job eventually. Some people say be selective of where you're applying, which, yeah, maybe if you want to apply somewhere where you probably have a better chance of getting, because your skill set and your portfolio really matches that studio or agency, is an interesting way to go too. So you might up your chances of getting a response rather than blindly applying too. But I think the moral of what I'm trying to say, I'm rambling, is don't be too hard on yourself during the application process, and consider what the landscape is like at the moment and it's hyper competitive. So I think just stay positive and keep going at a steady pace, and don't burn out applying for absolutely everything.
I think that's brilliant. That's brilliant advice. I suppose when you kind of apply, maybe as well, do something else that you actually do want to do, that you actually like, another project, something that will keep you on, or go for a walk, take up bird watching. There's a group that I've actually been following. But that was brilliant, Rakesh. Thank you. So June, about you, what advice have you can you give to our graduates about taking pressure off a little?
Yeah, I would say know your strengths. So like Rakesh was just saying, there's no point of applying to just everywhere that everyone's applying. Identify your strengths and find people who are a good match, who needs your skills. And also just forget social media if that's, if that is giving you not great vibe. Followers, likes don't give you a job, no money. So it's really, really not the representation of yourself. Also, not getting a job in this climate is not reflection of your ability, talent, no personality. But I think, like dating, you just need to find one person, one company, just the one who is a good match with you. It's two-way street. It's you need to like the company as much as they hire you. So don't get depressed. Just find a good match.
Okay, so find a good match, basically, and in order to do that, don't spend too much time on Instagram or Twitter. I would highly recommend as social media is LinkedIn. Actually, I did find that to be quite useful. If you're going to waste your time on social media, go on LinkedIn, because that's where the creative industry is hanging out. We do follow each other's business. We do, so find out the different type of people. Actually connect with all of us here, and you'll find out, you follow our stories and what we're doing, and then connect with other people in that network as well. That will also give you an idea of what people are doing, and maybe even lead to connections that will lead to etc. I would say that lead to jobs or whatever, but I would say, LinkedIn, I definitely found that to be quite useful within industry. Okay, thank you very much for your questions. I'll have some for your answers to those questions. I do have some questions that's coming through. Sorry, Jayanta?
Yeah.
Yes, of course.
You said something that I think is one of the most important aspects of perhaps what we've been talking about in this last question. And that is your portfolio and your resume are designed to weed out people as much as people are weeding you out. And I love what she said. It's a two-way conversation. And if you have work in your book that someone doesn't like, it's fairly probable that you're not going to like that place, you
Mhm.
know? And I think to the same extent, don't have things in your book that you really wouldn't want to do because you may get that job, you know, and not end up. And this was advice that was given to me as a student from a woman who worked at Wieden Kennedy at the time, Charlotte Moore. And it was the most profound bit of feedback that I'd taken. And I'm so glad June said that. But your portfolio, excuse me, is as much as a thing to weed out people as it is them to weed you out. So it's so important to acknowledge that it's a two-way conversation, and you've really got to, if someone doesn't want you or doesn't like your work, that may be a really good sign for you ultimately. And that even if you want to work there, and it's your end all be all, you have to pay attention to these things because they're very important to um, how you get to show up when you get the job. So thank you for mentioning that, June.
Yeah, yeah, that's a good idea. That's good. Yeah. So we're actually coming to the end almost, but there's a couple of questions that's coming through from a few people. I'm just going to ask one question, I think, which is there anything people don't tell you that you about going freelance? So is there anything people don't tell you about going freelance? I feel like so many creators are doing this now. So when you went freelance, what do people don't tell you about that you wish you'd actually knew, that you wish you'd, especially June, do you want to take that question? Because you went freelance, didn't you, how did you feel about what do you wish you knew before you went off, when you went off freelance trying to find work? How did you tackle that kind of thing? I think
Yeah, I mean, I think my advice for going freelance is, although I am enjoying my freelance life now, I would advise going into agency environment first, because you can learn much quicker from multiple people, hopefully when we open up more. If you go freelance straight away, which is some people might do, that's definitely a harder route. But unless you go your eyes wide open, it's fine. But my advice is learn from agency world first.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it's brilliant, and it's also I suppose it's a good way to get contacts before you then go off, because the agents might be your first client, for instance, so when you're in your freelance world. Rakesh, what about you? How did you feel about that?
I completely agree with what June just said. I think it's good to get your foundation set in agency, have a good few years, because you learn a ridiculous amount from the pros that end up mentoring you when you're in there. Like the seasoned designers and art directors teach you so much that you couldn't work out on your own in that short amount of time, where they could just drop a sentence when you'll blow your mind, and you'll use that technique for the rest of your career, kind of thing. That, but also understanding how agencies work, all the different departments that you can leverage to your advantage as a creative individual. Understanding the landscape will definitely enhance your own performance. I think once you get a good understanding of the traditional agent, the typical agency structure, and the types of work that go in there, you'd have enough of that in your book to go fishing for freelance work, because they'll look like an agency might look at your portfolio needing a freelancer and go, oh, they've got really similar agency work that we do, because there is a kind of common thread across the themes you can get in different agencies. And yeah, I guess it'd allow you to expand your client book as an individual. But yeah, being able to wink towards the industry itself, to offer your services to reinforce it is a good way to look at it.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you so much for that. I've got one more question, apparently. So this is for all three of you. Is with so much heavy competition for jobs at the moment, is it better to be a specialist, so stick to what you know, or to be generalist, so a bit of everything? So what have you guys found to be, Jayanta, do you want to answer that at the start? Yeah. So be a specialist or a generalist.
I was thinking about this before this question came up, because one of the things that I have benefited from, and Rakesh had somewhat mentioned it, but I have gotten to this point now because I've been able to think strategically, execute, and collaborate and really be not fluid. I won't use the word fluid exclusively, but I've been able to really have an understanding of business objectives in a way that have allowed me to be more creative because my creative approaches are informed by business objectives. And the way that I somewhat am starting to visualize this in the spirit of Disney is thinking about the Avengers and the Infinity Stones, and if they were Infinity Stones for the gauntlet of one's career, it would be creativity, it would be collaboration, it would be being strategic, and it would also be would be the fourth stone. But you see where I'm going with this.
Yeah, totally.
It's a collection of real specified skills that collaboratively give you the limitless ability to show up and solve business problems using, well, say it differently, a set of skills that come together to utilize creativity in service of business objectives, and so I don't think it's about being a generalist or a specialist, but I think it's having an innate understanding of all of the things that it takes to bring a bunch of stakeholders together and understand objectives and business outcomes and storytell to really help move people's business in that way. But I think I'm going to stop there because I could talk about this for a very, very long time. But, that's sort of my point of view. You have to really understand all aspects of this business because we are using creativity to solve business objectives,
Oh, brilliant. Thank you very much for that. Paul, Rakesh, I'm sorry, Paul, sorry, you just popped up and I saw your name there. Rakesh or June, so do you want to jump in? I think we're running out of time. Paul's like going, we're going to run out of stuff. Yeah. Rakesh, do you want to expand on that? A specialist or, I forget the question all of a sudden, sorry. A specialist or generalist? Yeah.
I would say, although what Jayanta was just talking about in terms of understanding a business when you get to that level and getting it to work to your advantage, I think when you're just breaking in, I would say generalist, because I think in relation to different types of software, whether you're more conceptually driven or executionally driven, soak it all up whilst you're new, and then you can define what you think you want to specialize in, even though that can still change. But I would say just take it all in and try your hand at as many things that can stick, and you'll just kind of broaden your arsenal of offerings in terms of what you can bring creatively.
Oh, brilliant, thank you. And then June, do you have something to say?
Yeah, really quickly. Yeah, I think it's good to have a foundation for all areas. But for me, I think niching down is the way to go. Just show people who you are very quickly, brand yourself, what you are, who you are, what's your edge. And I think that would, from my personal point of view, increase your high ability.
Okay, so basically you're a brand, so become a brand from the moment you leave university until and think of yourself in that way, and then therefore that will kind of, whilst learning, right?
Yeah.
and then you specialize. Oh, brilliant. Jayanta, Rakesh, June, thank you so much for being amazing.